Hi, loves, and welcome to the With Love Always podcast, a podcast to help you live the life you were created for. We are your hosts and your friends, Bree
and Marissa,
and we're so grateful you're here.
We pray you listen and leave feeling more inspired, encouraged, and uplifted.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. We are so grateful as always that you are here and that you are tuning in to this conversation today. For today, we're going to be talking all about why you should not settle and what that really looks like in our lives. I think so often, in our lives, we always hear, don't settle for less than what you deserve. But upon reflecting on that statement, I was like, do we actually know what that means? I feel like that statement is thrown out so often, but what does it really look like to live a life in which we are not just settling? And what does it look like to live a life in which we are going after the things that we deserve? So in this episode, I'm going to break down so many things when it comes to settling based off of personal experiences. And just really pray that this conversation can encourage you guys that with whatever you're thinking about in your life, whether it's a relationship, a career, a goal, an aspiration, opportunity, whatever it may be, we ultimately want to encourage you guys not to settle for less than the absolute best for yourself. And I think more than manifesting the life that you want, it's truly about following and inviting God's best into your life. So let's jump into the topic of not settling today. So to kind of kick off this conversation, I think a really big thing to keep in mind when we're talking about not settling is to really identify in your life what are the areas in your life in which you see yourself more prone to settling. I imagine if you are listening to this episode, you may already have a circumstance or thing in the back of your mind or heart that you can very tangibly think about, or maybe you have a question of in your life of, am I settling in this? Or is this the best for me? I don't know. Maybe there's wrestling over a certain area of your life. And I think ultimately, whether that's in romantic relationships, your career, your health, your well-being, your goals in life, your aspirations, whatever it may be, I think we all know what it feels like to ask yourself, is this actually what I want for myself? Is this actually the best for me? Is this actually, what I'd always dreamt of over this? And I think ultimately, in moments when I've seen myself wanting to choose the easy way out or wanting to make a quick decision over something or wanting to force something to work, and I'm essentially settling in something, I think more than it being a loss over this area of my life, it more so exposes the area of my heart that might be weak and unbelieving and not truly taking hold of the sense of worth and value and ultimately the patience that I would be wanting to have in order to see God's best through in this part of my life. And I think such a tangible example of this that for example, could be an area that maybe some of you guys who are like me and you're single and you're dating and you deeply desire marriage or that next step in your life. I think an area that's very common for a lot of women and men is settling when it comes to relationships. And I really was thinking about this and putting this into perspective when I was thinking about my own dating life and, just aside from that too, just identifying different areas of my life that I am tempted to settle in at different points in my life. But when I was thinking specifically about dating and my desire for marriage, I was like, whoa, like if I really was willing to settle and if I was really just so overcome by my deep desire to be married, the reality is that I could already be married by now, or I could already be in a very serious relationship for a long amount of time if I desired marriage more than I desired God's best for my life. And I think that was such a thought because truly in our lives, like when we are so overcome by a certain desire or a certain aspiration or a certain dream, want, or whatever it may be, I think that is when we are the most tempted to settle because we want that thing ultimately first and foremost. But if there's anything that I realized through kind of having this revelation was, like I said with dating, if I wanted marriage more than anything, more than God's best for my life, more than, really being patient and waiting for the absolute greatest gift that I could receive, I could already be kind of living in a counterfeit version of what I really want. And what I mean by that is I could have already settled for a relationship that is halfway of what I've desired. I could already settle for a marriage that is good, but it's not the great that I've always prayed for. And so I think when you are thinking about this conversation with yourself and your inner dialogue, really get honest with yourself and ask yourself, what are the areas of your life that you see yourself most prone to settle in? And ask yourself why. Why is there a part of you that is disbelieving over this area of your life? Why is there a part of you that is willing to settle in this area of your life? Is it because you desire it more than God's best for your life? And if so, take a hold of that and we pray that we can encourage you throughout this whole conversation because ultimately, that instant gratification is not often the best thing for you in the long term. And I've seen for myself, the more that I've been willing to be patient and the more that I've been willing to wait and honestly surrender my desire versus settle for a counterfeit version of what I actually want, the better off that I am in the long term. Yeah, so I think dating for me can be one where I'm the most tempted to want to settle, but will not settle. But yeah, Marissa, I would love to hear from you. Are there any areas of your life that you feel like you're more prone to settle than others?
I feel like there are actually quite a few, which when I was thinking of this, I'm like, ooh, that's a little convicting. But one of them, and I think I'm really working through this, but I touched on this a little bit in our loneliness episode where I was talking about a season during the pandemic of just feeling lonely. And I just remember the thoughts when I was in that season. I really was like, ooh, I think this is as good as it's gonna get. And that wasn't a diss to the people in my life because they were amazing, but it was more like I just didn't believe that there was true community out there for me. I was really just afraid that I was going to be isolated. I was going to have friends, but I wasn't going to have community to walk through life with day to day. And I think again, that's not necessarily even something I wasn't even really choosing to settle, but I think believing that was what was best for me was inevitably settling in a way. And when I finally just embrace the fact that God has more for me and he loves community and desires that, I realized this is actually just a season and this does not determine how my life is going to be. And it's okay when we walk through seasons in which they feel like less than, but that actually means that there is so much more on the other side for us. And that was such a great learning experience. And I found that in so many different areas where even right now, I think I mentioned, but I left my previous job and I remember towards the end just really feeling is this all there is for me? I felt called to this job for a reason, but now I'm feeling like it's not what's best. Did I settle? Should I stay in this? And as I've now been on the other side and there still is a lot of uncertainty, I'm realizing God has so much more for me and he has so many areas he's wanting me to grow in. And although there's so much uncertainty, I actually have so much more hope and excitement, even though yes, there's not a clear pathway that there once was in my previous career. I'm taking such a shift, but now there's so much hope because I feel so much purpose and I feel okay, this is what it feels like not to settle. When you wait on what is truly meant for you, it feels like something that fills your soul and challenges you and gets you excited. And so, yeah, I kind of want to include that as a bit of a caveat is sometimes we are called kind of like I gave the example of remaining faithful. I felt like I was supposed to stick out my job for a little bit longer, which I did, and I waited on God's timing on that. And so that might be what you also feel called to. I need to remain faithful in this for a little bit longer. but with the belief that there is something better and I'm doing this for a reason and I'm not choosing this as my permanence, because that's what I feel like we settle in when we believe this is the best and we've arrived to the best, rather than this is part of our journey to get us to the best that God is preparing us for. So
Mm.
I hope that can encourage you guys and really just, I know both of those situations stretched my faith so much. And I realized that I was actually settling in my belief of what was best for me and what God was capable of. I was kind of limiting him. And now I'm like, okay, God, you have so much in store for me. Don't let me put a box around what you're capable of and what you can do in my life. Like, let me just, like you mentioned, surrender it over to you so that you can remove any sense of a desire to settle for security or anything like that.
Wow, yeah, that's really, really powerful. I think that also like brings me to like the next train of thought is like truly asking ourselves like why are the reasons that we settle. And I think in moments of my life where I have wanted so desperately to settle on something because I saw it as like, okay, this is finally my yes to the season of my life changing, or this is finally my yes to a dream opportunity, or this is finally my yes to a change in my career. When I have clung so tightly and have been so desperate to make something work and to force something into place, it ultimately does not actually show me how hardworking I am. It doesn't show me how persistent I am or how much perseverance I have. It ultimately exposes the area of my heart that is willing to settle. And I think that for me is like something that it's such a fine line and something you really have to put into perspective because only you can know if you are settling for something versus like what Marissa said when there's a difference between persevering through something but then also settling for something. And so when I was just really reflecting on this in my own life, I just kind of wrote out like a list of a couple things that I've seen for myself have been reasons why I've settled in the past, and I've seen for other people are reasons why they have settled. So we just want to like dive into some of those reasons and kind of like speak through each of them, and maybe one of them resonates with you and makes you feel really seen for why maybe you feel stuck or like you're settling in a specific area of your life. And so I'm going to speak through 5 different points. And the first point is a scarcity mindset, which ultimately a scarcity mindset is the belief that we don't think anything better is available for us. And I think this one's such a hard one. And this one is one that I think it's so easy to feel like, we are 20 something years old and we've experienced a lot of life, but there is so much more life to live. And I think about different times in my life where, I've experienced the first of something, whether it's like the first big advance in my career or the first really deep, intimate, like love with somebody, or whether it's the first friendship that refines me in this way, or whether it's the first time I've ever felt this sure about something or confident about something or insecure about something, whatever it may be. I think in our life, we're going to experience a lot of firsts. And when we do, it's so easy to cling to that experience in time and think, well, this is the only experience I will ever have like this. Like,
Mhm.
this is the only first date that will ever go this good. This is the only person who will fully understand me and listen to me. This is the only career that will give me the salary and the job title that I want. This is the only city that will, fulfill me. These are the only friendships that I could ever make because it's so hard to make friends. I think when we surround ourselves with the belief that this is the only available thing to us, it really keeps us in this like mindset of wanting to hold so tightly to it because we're afraid that if we let it go, it will never be replaced. And if there's anything that I have learned in my life so far, is that that is not true. And in a beautiful way, whether it's in a relationship, it's like if you are able to have a beautiful connection with someone, gosh, let it be your hope in the future that you will have that connection again. If this is a career that once gave you such deep fulfillment, let it be a hope that this is not the only experience of that fulfillment you will receive, but you will actually experience that again. And so, yeah, I think the belief that nothing better exists is something that holds us back so much. And I've seen as something that has held me back a lot, like in so many areas of my life. So that
Good.
that's a big one.
Okay, and the second reason why we settle is because we don't trust that God has something better for us. And this correlates back to the two scenarios I just gave. And this is something that God is just reminding me of every single day, that God can work beyond my imagination, beyond my limits, beyond my fears. And He has something that is going to be so much better than I could ever imagine. And we will get there with due time. So I think just really believing that what we always say, like the best is yet to come. Like we are just getting started, and we truly are people who feel like we are going to experience the best friendships, the best love, the best. Honestly, just there's so much more for us, not because we think like we're even like worthy of that, or we have to earn this thing, or we're going to work so hard to get this thing, but rather that because God made us and He has an intention and purpose, that there are also good things He has in store for us. And they will come because we are worthy, because we are His child. And so I think just, yeah, trying not to limit God and limit our own beliefs in that, knowing that there's always just something truly better. That truly, when we say better, like I just think of that feeling of like your soul being full, and you just know that feeling where you're like, this is what I was meant for. Like,
Mm,
this is what I was preparing for. This is what I feel like I am supposed to do. And so that's a feeling that I've experienced. And I feel like there's just more and more of that to come. And that gets me really excited.
yeah, I love that. I think a next point and another reason why we settle, which you kind of introduced, is that we've ultimately lost our imagination and our ability to dream. I think it's so easy. I think the older we get, the more, I don't know, like logic based, realistic we get, and the less that we actually indulge in our imagination or we indulge in the beauty of dreaming. And something I always say to myself and to others is like, the dreams and the desires that are deeply innately within you, they're not for nothing. And that's not to say that the expression of those desires in your lifetime will be exactly what you always imagined, but maybe they will be. But all those little details about you and your heart and what you want for yourself and what you envision for your life, it is all authored within your heart and in your spirit for a reason. And so I think so often we really try to protect ourselves by not dreaming too big because we are so afraid that if we dream too big that we are going to be disappointed by not seeing those dreams come true, or we're going to be disappointed by our life or whatever it may be. And I think if there's anything that I can encourage anyone, including myself, is like dream as big as possible, not necessarily because your crazy dreams are going to be the reality, but because it's such a beautiful thing to hold and harbor that belief that anything is possible. And I think when we are not super attached even to our dreams or to our imagination, but instead it's more so the practice of just literally letting our minds wander and just thinking outside of the box and thinking really big for ourselves. I really believe that is the space and the mindset and the energy that we're putting out that really invites God and invites those beautiful, unexpected dreams of yours to come and take place in your life. And so don't lose your imagination. Don't lose your dream just because the world tells you that that's impossible, or others tell you that it's impossible, or you're telling yourself that. Because if anything I've seen in my life, some of the dreams that I thought were crazy and could never happen happened. And it's only because I gave myself permission to dream as big as I did.
Reason number 4 is we get too focused on being comfortable. And I am someone who knows this too well, because innately how I am wired is that I love my comforts. I love remaining in my comfort zone. And surprisingly, I'm actually not somebody who like goes out of my way to challenge myself. I think I've learned to, and now I can grow to appreciate that. So if you're somebody who is like, wait, I love staying in my comfort zone, I just want to call you higher, because like I said, it wasn't until I was really challenged and had people in my life that were like, "Hey, it's awesome that you found these things that you're comfortable with or that you're good at, but I believe you're capable of more. So why don't you actually challenge yourself or why don't you actually push yourself harder?" And it started to kind of give me permission and freedom to just kind of to like Bree's previous point, dream a little bit bigger and realize maybe this thing actually could be something I love. It's just that I've never even given it the time of day. Even honestly, so silly, and we always talk about it, but like with surfing, I just genuinely thought that was never something I would like
Mhm.
because I didn't feel like I was super adventurous. But honestly, I never just got out in the water and actually tried. And it wasn't until I did something where I felt unqualified and I felt a little embarrassed and it felt way out of my comfort zone that I realized, wait, this is actually so fun and I feel so silly for just assuming that that's not something I would do.
Yeah.
And I've done that a lot and it's something I'm really working on and I just want to encourage you guys like I think it gets easier the moment you step out of your comfort zone and it actually works or it actually is fun or rewarding, you realize like, okay, there actually can be safety, there can be joy beyond just my comfort zone. So why don't I just start with little baby steps outside of it and just go and do, one thing next week that makes me a little bit uncomfortable, whether that's talking to somebody or honestly, there's so many different things, but yeah, I think just stepping beyond our own physical and mental comfort zone can be huge and it really can prevent us from just settling in our own lives.
Yeah. I think that's so powerful too with that point because I know for myself that what is more painful than being comfortable is the pain of knowing that you are like missing an opportunity
Yeah.
because you're afraid of being so comfortable. And I think that kind of like leads into my last point, which I started to talk about, but is I believe we settle because we're so afraid of being disappointed. We're so afraid of disappointing ourselves. We're so afraid of like, oh, well, what if it doesn't work out? And we always hear the saying, well, what if it does? And I think it's the same thing. It's like we get so caught up in being comfortable because we know in the place of comfort, there's security. And in the place of security, we can't get hurt. We can't get harmed. We won't be made vulnerable. We won't be putting ourselves out there. We won't be willing to be bad at something. But also in that, it's painful to know that there's a huge part of you that will never get to see a higher expression of yourself. And I think, whether it's surfing or I'm sure most of you guys know that I ran a marathon earlier this year and I actually just signed up for my second marathon. If I would have lived in the comfort of what I knew at the time I was capable of, I would have never have signed up for a marathon and I would have never have pushed myself to such uncomfortable limits to be capable of accomplishing an even bigger goal. And I think though I could have absolutely, there could be a world in which I never ran a marathon and I will never run a marathon, but there would always be the pain or the like wondering of like, oh, I wonder if I could or I wish I could, but I'm not good enough for that. And I think if I would have submitted to the fear that I wasn't capable, and if I submitted to the fear of it's gonna be too hard and too strenuous and maybe I'm not able to do it, I would have never have lived in the joy of proving myself otherwise. And so I think so often we get so afraid that because our dreams are too big or because it's going to require something of us that we don't even want to try and we want to stay safe in that place of comfort and stay safe in that place of not being disappointed. But if there's anything that I've learned, like I said, it's the pain of remaining the same is far greater than the pain of being temporarily uncomfortable. And so those are some of the reasons why we've identified that we've settled in our life. And I want to continue on the conversation with overall just signs that you may be settling in your life. And so I just wrote a couple statements that honestly, like as always, with every single episode that we ever speak on, like we are inspired by things in our own life and truly these statements and these like signs of settling are things that were inspired by my own life of like ways I've been able to really recognize and almost be waking up of like, whoa, I was settling. So I'm just going to read some of these, and maybe some of you guys will resonate with these signs. Um, but signs that I know I am settling is times in my life when I have to convince myself that I'm excited rather than naturally experiencing joy or passion. I think we can all think of a time in our life when we have to convince ourselves that something is a good thing versus like just genuinely believing that. That's a really painful experience. And if you are spending more time trying to convince yourself, I think that within itself is a sign that your body and your mind is kind of telling you like something's not quite right here. Second sign that I have been able to identify in my life that I'm settling is why I'm making excuses, or is me making excuses about why I rather stay put rather than going after something that I really, really want. And so going back even to the marathon example, I remember when people were trying to convince me to sign up for the marathon. I was like, oh, no, 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 no. Like the most I've ever ran is, you know, I don't know, 13 miles. Like, there's just no way that I could run twice as much. Like, that's just too much on my body. I don't have time. And I was just making excuses for why I couldn't. And really, I knew that in my heart, like, there was a huge part of me that wanted to chase after this goal, but I was just ultimately really, really afraid at the time. So my excuses were preventing me from saying yes to what I really wanted. A third sign I've seen in my life is when I'm rushing into something out of fear. A quick example I will give you guys. So I am from Texas originally. You guys know that I now live in LA, but there was a point in my life where I had the deep desire to move. And I, for whatever reason, got really fixated on moving to Nashville, Tennessee. Shout out to anyone listening that may live there. But I think out of my own fear, or more so out of my own desire to move, I had like a short time in my life where I was like really trying to force the move to Nashville, and it just felt like nothing was working out in my favor, and I was just trying to rush into a decision that was so clearly not for me. And not that God couldn't have been in that if I decided to have made that move, but I think in hindsight the reality was I was forcing things into place that were not meant to be in place, and ultimately it didn't work out. And that for me was a sign that because I was trying to rush so many decisions, I wasn't actually making the decision that was so for me. And honestly, I felt like every obstacle kind of showed itself in order to stop me from rushing into something out of the fear of, if I don't do it now, I never will, because that proved to not be true. Um, Another point is when I know that I'm settling is that I actually start feeling very anxious about whatever it is, whether it's a relationship, a career, life decision. I find that when anxiety is attached to it for myself, I know that's when I'm taking a little bit too much control of the situation. And I feel like anxiety is, at least for me, a sign in my body that is almost like alerting me of like, hey, like you're just kind of overconsumed by this. You're over preoccupied with whatever this is, and you're taking so much control that maybe is not even yours to take in the first place. I know that I'm settling when I have to tell myself over and over again that this is as good as it gets. And I know that I've been settling when a decision or circumstance or life choice or whatever it may be gets to be really, really, really exhausting. And that's not to say life isn't exhausting, life isn't hard, but I think the things that are for us, they're meant to bring peace. They're meant to fall into place. They're meant to be seamless. And I've seen in myself, like, when the exact opposite is true, it's usually because I'm, one, trying to force something into place, I'm two, taking too much control, and three, I'm settling for something versus just allowing God's best to happen to me. So those are some of my signs I'm settling, and I don't know if any of you guys resonate with those, but first, I don't know if you have any extra signs in which you've known you're settling, or in ways that other people can, discern if they're settling in their lives.
Yeah, I think that list was so good, and I relate it to so many of them. I think for me, like, a huge one is just discontentment, and I am someone who, like, discontentment, I think, is something I can fall a victim to, and I think sometimes it's like, yes, I do need to just be more grateful and stuff, but I do think discontentment is there for a reason, and it's at least a signal that I should pay attention to. And I think to kind of go with the second part of this is like a big sign that I'm settling is when I feel like I'm capable of more and I'm not fully leaning into my strengths. And that a lot of times is the reason for my discontentment. It's not because I'm not grateful or appreciative of the circumstance or that I'm doing my best in that circumstance. It's that I feel like there's so much more ahead and I actually know that in that current state, I can't get there. So it's not like I'm working to that, putting in my time to then work to get promoted. It's that I know that this thing that I'm in, it's actually not using what I feel like is my true gifting and my true strengths that God gave me. And so that to me is a huge signal where I'm like, oh gosh, I'm settling because I'm not fully getting to exercise like what I was created for and like what I actually feel like my gifting is. So that's a huge one. And then to kind of go with that as well is just like when you stop learning or growing in a situation. And there are times where you're not always going to be learning something new and always feel like you're growing. But I do think when you just get to such a place of you're so stagnant, I think, like, life is meant to challenge us. I think God's always challenging me. He's always pushing me for more and better, and I think that keeps life exciting and it gives it so much purpose, and so I really want the things I'm pursuing and even the people in my life to be calling me to the same. Like, I don't want to feel like me at 25 is the same exact same as who I am at 35. I want to feel like I'm wiser and more loving and more kind and that I'm actually growing and I know new skills. And so that I think is huge if you're just again it kind of signals to if you're living too much in your comfort zone and you're not learning anything new, you're not trying anything new, you're not meeting anyone new, you're probably settling in that circumstance. And so those I know were a lot of different signals, but again, it's hard to know if you're settling. So I hope that list can kind of point you in the right direction.
Yeah. So, transitioning into, identifying the areas of your life you're prone to settling, reasons why you might be settling, all those sorts of things. We ultimately want to also speak to life ways that we have been able to notice in our life that we're not settling and that we're actually living out the absolute best for our lives. So I know so distinctly in my life when I have not settled because it's often been paired with the experience, the perception of, wow, this just surpassed my wildest dreams or my wildest expectations. And this truly is a pinch me, it's too good to be true moment. We all have had and experienced those moments in our life when we're like, this is like the most unbelievable thing. We are full of so much joy. We're full of so much peace. We are watching every single detail miraculously fall into place. We're watching, the timeline of it, not always, but often can be very accelerated. All of a sudden, things can fall into perfect place and perfect peace. And if there's anything that I have seen in my life when I can really be a witness of, wow, this is God's best for me, and wow, I have no room in my life to even question if I'm settling because it's too good to be true. It is the very thing that is ultimately meant for you. I can think about so many things in my life right now, not to repeat the same stories a million times, but when I finally got to see the fulfillment of the desire to move by moving to LA, it really was one of those things that with how everything fell into perfect place, with how every detail fell into place, how much peace I had. I mean, of course, there's other emotions to accompany it, but I had so much peace first and foremost. And I had no doubt in my mind, like there was nowhere else I wanted to be but LA. It was that certainty and that peace and that experience of watching myself 1 month have a desire to move to LA and the very next, everything falling into place that gave me zero room to question that this is the absolute best for me. I think about the job that I have right now. To give a little bit of backstory, I was working a corporate job and I was so discontent, which, to what Marissa said, is a sign that often alludes to you might be settling. I was so discontent, I ended up quitting my job cold turkey and didn't have a formal job, if you will, for like 6 months, which that sounds insane. Don't worry, I had other means of income. I was working on it, but I didn't have like a formal job for a while. And I remember telling my mom at the time, I was like, I can't even imagine applying for a job because there's nothing that I want to do. Like, there's nothing on the market, there's nothing on LinkedIn that I want to do. And I refuse to settle. I refuse to do something just because I'm scared that I have to make a certain amount of money, or I'm scared that, I have this expectation of what's realistic, and, reality and logic says that when you quit your job, you have to get another one. And I refused to do that because I knew that it would be a compromise of myself. And I think about it, if I were to have applied to a job and just got a job just for the sake of getting a job, it would not have set me up to be where I am now. I have, I moved to LA. I have what was my dream job when I moved to LA, and I would not have my dream job now if I would have settled for another job too soon. And I think that is the beautiful part, and the moments when you're not settling, because I think oftentimes the things that are kind of those, wow, it was too good to be true moments, is going to require your patience, and it is going to require some time. But when you are receiving and like sitting in the midst of that blessing, you are going to feel that peace. You're going to feel that confirmation. And you will honestly have no doubt in your mind that this is like the highest desire of your heart. And I think that's a beautiful moment that we will all experience. And the beauty of that is that we won't experience it once, we'll experience it multiple times. And so, yeah, those are some of the ways that I know and have seen in my life that I am not settling, is that experience of like, whoa, this is greater than anything I could have ever dreamt of for myself.
Yeah, and I think that's, like, the evidence when I'll have, like, people ask me and friends be like, "How do you know, like, if it's of God and stuff?" And I'm like, there are a lot of practical ways in which we can
Yeah.
unpack, but actually you don't always know until you're, like, there on the other side.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, like, God has rewritten so many circumstances, and it's like, when it is of God, because it is too good to be true, because that is his character, and he operates from a place that extends beyond logic. It extends beyond the details that we have to like so manically figure out. And it just is like, when you can surrender and you can trust and you can be faithful, you will know what it's like not to settle, because you will feel it in your heart and you'll feel like, yes, this is what I was waiting for. This is what I was preparing for. This is what God's best is for me. Like, this is such a beautiful blessing.
Yeah.
And you get to proclaim it. And it doesn't mean that it wasn't hard. It wasn't hard to wait. Like, Bree is very much like amidst, like you could think of even dating and like
Yeah.
waiting and waiting. And I'm sure you'll tell that story one day and it'll seem like easy to the people listening in the same way some of those things seem like, oh, that's so great. Like, of course, your life is working out. But it's like, no, there's a lot that goes into it. You are trusting. Every day you have to choose to trust that there is something better. And like when you meet your person and you are saying I do, you're like, this is God's best. Like, I wouldn't want anybody else here but you. And I'm so glad I waited. That is what it feels like to not settle. And that is what it feels like, honestly, to get to experience like the blessings I feel like that God has to offer for us.
Yes. And I just feel like all of the anxiety is just brought to peace. Like, all of the striving is just brought to a sense of calm. And it's like, I think ultimately, like, our body always knows before our minds do sometimes. And like I said, it's like when I am exhausted, I'm anxious, I'm stressed, I'm full of anxiety, full of fear, like that is a sign that I'm forcing something, versus like when it is the sign that this is so for you, the sense of calm and peace and just like joy that comes over you is like, it's the most insane feeling ever. That it's like, wow, how did I ever operate in that place of like anxiety and worry and fear and all that sort of stuff? But with all of that said, we kind of want to close out this conversation and just like our thoughts on settling and why we want to encourage you guys not to settle by also encouraging you guys in the same breath that the reality is that life is going to require some sort of settling and some sort of compromise. And the reason why we bring this up is because we also don't want to like take away from the beautiful reality that life isn't always that pinch me moment. Life isn't always full of, wow, this exceeded my greatest expectations. Life isn't always everything is like, you know, what you've always dreamt of. Like there are moments when it's not gonna be. There's moments when it's hard and there's moments when you're gonna have to compromise. But I think I just want to kind of finish off this conversation by reminding you that though we want to encourage you guys to strive for your wildest dreams and to believe that you are worthy of those things and to be patient and endure this season of your life in exchange for the beautiful gifts that are ahead of you, we also want to equally recognize that not all settling that you may be experiencing in your life right now is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing if you're having to choose a job that isn't quite what you want right now, but you know could be segueing you to a beautiful opportunity in the future. It's not a bad thing to, you know, be in friendships right now that you love and adore, but isn't exactly the life-giving friendships you want to choose in the future. It's okay to be realistic with yourself and be like, you know, I don't have the time to commit to this beautiful big goal and aspiration, but I promise myself that there will come a time where I do have the time to dedicate in the future. And so I think sometimes for me, in moments when I've had to choose or compromise what I really wanted in a moment in exchange for being more patient and allowing more time to pass, I think it's been actually a really beautiful thing and a humbling thing. And if anything, it's been a revealing thing to me that maybe the thing that I really was dreaming of in this present moment in time is actually not what I need. And I think about that in so many examples, like even the moving example. You know, I thought at the time I was settling by staying in Texas. I thought I was settling by not moving to Nashville and just remaining in Austin for another year. And that was a compromise I had to make with myself because that doorway wasn't opening for me. And I'm so grateful in hindsight that I quote unquote settled for staying in Texas one more year because I did that and I was patient with that desire. A whole year later, God opened up the perfect opportunity for me to move to LA, a dream that I genuinely didn't even have. But being on the other side of the blessing, I'm like, wow, this is greater than the dreams I had for myself. And I think that can apply to so many different areas of life. Like, I think about in moments when, you know, even in dating, like I was so sure about this person and I really wanted to move forward with this person, but the presence of peace didn't exist. And I thought I was settling or like missing out on my life because I wasn't saying yes to this opportunity in front of me. But in hindsight, the patience and the willingness to let go of something and the willingness to settle for my singleness, if you will, versus entering into a dating relationship is actually going to be the most beautiful gift for me in the long term. So remind yourself that you ultimately have the ability to choose your life. You don't have to settle for your life. So I pray that with whatever you're contemplating in your life, whether you're asking yourself if you're settling or you feel like you are, we just pray that this conversation gives you the courage to, one, identify those things in your life, but two, ultimately to believe in so much bigger, to believe you are worthy of the things that you want, and also to believe that you have so much life ahead of you. We said it earlier in this episode, but truly something I always believe, even in the middle of experiencing a pinch me, this is too good to be true moment, is that for as beautiful and as big and as rich as these moments are now, they're only going to get better. They're only going to continue on. Like there's always going to be more opportunities in front of you. There's going to be more people to love and be loved by. There's going to be more goals to reach. And you are deserving of those things in your life because God loves you enough to give those to you. So, yeah, we pray that this was encouraging today.
Okay, for this week's Love Notes, we have Thanksgiving coming up, so I thought it would be fun to start by talking about one of our favorite topics, which is food. So Thanksgiving food, what we're excited to eat potentially, or just some of our favorite Thanksgiving food.
My favorite Thanksgiving food, I love stuffing so much. I honestly love all Thanksgiving food. I know so many people don't love Thanksgiving food. I think it's amazing, but I would say stuffing, a sweet potato casserole, and just turkey, that, like, oh my gosh, I love it. I look forward to it every single year. It's my favorite.
Yum. Are you like a Thanksgiving lunch or dinner?
Lunch, so I can digest all day long. I'm more like maybe like a late lunch.
I think that's what we normally do.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we kind of just start eating and then you like don't stop. And
Yeah.
basically you go to bed because it's like you wait till you like have a little more space in your stomach
And then you eat more.
But that's the fun of it. But I love anything sweet potato. Divine.
So good. My favorite.
I like turkey. It's funny, I actually like more of like a cold turkey, like turkey sandwich situation. I think it's because I don't know if there's like a sauce that I've like loved at Thanksgiving, but
You don't like gravy?
I don't like.
Yeah, I love gravy.
So
I could
sad.
drink it.
I did. Maybe I'm gonna like try. Maybe I need to keep experimenting.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like you decide when you're a kid what you like at Thanksgiving and you just do the same thing.
Yes.
So maybe I'll be more adventurous, but I always love a good like veggie dish. Like if it's like Brussels sprouts or like a broccoli or like green bean is always so yummy. And then like lots of breads.
Yeah.
Obsessed.
Yeah.
Anything like very carby and like just like
I'm the same way. I love all the carbs.
and the desserts. I'm such a pie person. I love all
I
the
love
pie.
pie too.
So good. Okay, next, as far as what we're doing this year for Thanksgiving, how are you celebrating?
So I'm actually, I don't remember if I told you this, but I am going to be hiking Zion National Park.
That's so fun.
Yeah, and we're going to Zion, and then we're going to Antelope Valley, and then the Grand Canyon. So my only Thanksgiving this year, I'm actually not going to have a Thanksgiving this year, is probably a turkey sandwich on a hike.
Honestly, that sounds really fun though.
Yeah. So I'll be out in nature.
I love that. I'm just doing kind of the usual for us. We have like a smaller immediate family, so I'll just go to my parents. They're nearby, and then my brother and his wife and his baby, and then like our uncle. And so just kind of a small family get together. And thankfully my brother and his wife are great cooks and my mom's a great cook. So I'll be there to help out, but they'll do the majority of the cooking. My dad and I are the professional eaters. We like,
Oh, I love that.
like such foodies. And so, yeah, I'm excited to just eat away my Thanksgiving.
Oh, so fun.
But we will report back, and I'm sure Brie will have a lot of amazing photos. That sounds so fun. Now I'm like, I need to do something adventurous on Thanksgiving.
I'm so excited. It'll be my first non-traditional Thanksgiving. I always just like have a meal, but I'm going to be, hiking.
Wait, is this your first Thanksgiving where you're not in Texas?
I wasn't in Texas last year, but I had a friend and she invited me to go spend Thanksgiving with her grandparents. So I still had like a formal meal. But yeah, so this will be my second Thanksgiving not in Texas.
Wow.
I know.
Okay, that concludes this episode. We hope you guys found it valuable always, and we will be praying for you and thinking of you this week, and we will see you in our next episode. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much for listening. We pray this episode was encouraging and life-giving. If you found it valuable, please share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe.
And be sure to follow us along over on Instagram at With Love Always Podcast. Signing off with all of our love always, Brie
And Marissa.